Okay, so this is the NewYear CountDown project, and this is relatively simple. We're going to use some CSS to create this landing page, have a nice little overlay on our image here, and basically it just counts down until the next year, and it's actually January 2nd today, so you can see we have 364 days, 4 hours, 30 minutes, 3 seconds, and this is going to be completely dynamic, meaning that even if the year changes, so if you open this in 5 years, it's still going to work, and it's actually going to show the correct year here. This is going to be dynamic. This is generated in JavaScript, this little 2021 here. And then if it goes into next year, this will basically reset. Okay, so we're going to look at that. Also, when the page loads, you'll see a little spinner here that loads for 1 second, and then it shows the countdown. So we're going to implement that as well. Okay, so pretty simple project, but we're going to be dealing with some CSS, creating the overlay here, and then we're going to be dealing with dates and times in JavaScript. We're going to look at set interval and set timeout and a couple other things as well. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start on our NewYear CountDown project, and we're going to do the HTML first and then style it, and then implement the JavaScript to actually give us the countdown. And then once we do that, we're going to implement the little spinner graphic so that that just loads for a second before it actually shows us the time. And then lastly, we're also going to have the year kind of in the background, or the next year. In this case, it'll be 2021. And we want that to be dynamic because we don't want to have to go in and update it every year. So let's start with the HTML. And as far as the file structure, just our standard 3 files here. And then in addition to that, an image folder with a spinner graphic. And of course, you can use any spinner graphic you want, but this will be in the resources. So let's create a boilerplate here, and let's say NewYear CountDown, and link our style sheet, and then our JavaScript. Oops, what did I do? So for the body, we're going to have just a placeholder for the year, that year that's going to kind of be faded into the background. So I'm going to give this an ID and a class of year. And we're just going to leave that for now. And then we'll have our H1 that'll just say NewYear CountDown, or whatever you want it to say, really. And then we want a div with an ID of countdown and a class of countdown for styling. And then in here, we're basically going to section it off into 4 different parts: the days, the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. And each one is going to have a class of time. And inside this time class, we'll have an H2 with an ID of whatever the unit is, in this case, days. And then just have 00 as a default. And then we'll have a small tag with the unit as well that'll display on the screen. And then we'll just go ahead and copy this down. We need 4 of these. So this second one here is going to be the hours. So we just want to change the ID and change this. And then this is going to be the minutes. And then this is going to be the seconds. All right. And then we'll have our loader, our spinner. I'm actually going to put it here, but I'm going to comment it out for now. So this image is going to have an ID of loading and a class of loading. And the source is going to be in our IMG folder /spinner. And for the alt, let's say loading ... All right, and then I'm just going to comment this out. Oops. Let's comment that out. Okay, so if I open this up with Live Server, it's just going to look like this. We'll make it smaller so we can style it. Okay, so let's open up Style CSS, and we'll add our base styles here. So I'm actually going to use the Lato font, so we'll grab that from Google. Right here. I'll just grab the import, copy that, put that in there, and then add our box sizing. And then on the body, we have quite a few things to do here. We're going to add a background image of a URL, and I'm going to use a remote image from Unsplash, and I'm going to paste it in because it's a long file name. And you can use any image you want if you want to use something different. If you want to copy this, you can just get it from the GitHub repository. And then we want to add some background properties. We could just add it to the background property, but I figured I'd mix it up and just use separate properties here. We'll say background repeat, no repeat. Background size is going to be cover. Background position is going to be center on the X and Y axis. So if we save that, it's going to cover down to where the content ends. Obviously, we want this to cover the whole page, so we just need to add a height of 100 viewport heights. And then let's make the color of the text white. And let's apply our font family, which is going to be Lato. Okay, and then I'm gonna use Flexbox here to center everything. So, oops, we want to say display flex, and let's make it into a column. So flex direction is going to be column. Okay, then we can align everything to the center. So we'll do align items center. Oops. We'll do justify content center, and we'll do text align center. Okay, good. And then let's just remove any margin on the body. And then also overflow, I'm going to set to hidden to get rid of any scroll bars. Now, as far as the background image, you can see it's pretty bright, so it kind of, you know, the contrast here isn't great with the text and the background image. So I want to have an overlay, a dark overlay, and there's a few ways to do this. You could just make the actual image darker, but that's kind of a pain. You have to open up a, you know, Photoshop or something like that. So we're going to do this within CSS. You could add an extra div in your HTML and style that, but what I'm going to do is just take the body and I'm going to use the pseudo selector after, which allows us to basically create kind of like a ghost element after the body. And there's also before. You can do before or after. And this is one of my favorite ways to do like an overlay. So I'm actually going to put a comment here and say this adds a dark overlay. Now, when you use before or after, you have to use a content property. And you can actually insert content here if we wanted to, but we don't. So we're just going to use just empty quotes. And then let's position this. We want it to lay over the entire body, so we're going to position it absolute and set it to the top left. So top 0, left 0. All right, now we want it to go across the entire thing and cover it, so width 100, height 100%. And then if we add a background color, so I could do like background color red, and if I do that, it just covers the whole thing, and that's what we want. However, we want it to have a transparency, so we can use RGBA, which is red, green, blue, alpha. So 000 gives us black, and then the alpha, which is the transparency, I'll set to 0.5. And now you can see we have that dark overlay. Now the problem we have here is the text is behind the overlay. See how it's darker? So what we can do is just take everything in the body, so just body asterisk, and set the Z index, which will bring it forward. We can set it to 1, and that brings everything in the body forward over the overlay. Okay, so the only thing the overlay is covering is the actual body background image. Now, I just want to make the H1 bigger and just position it. So let's set the font size. Let's set it to 60 pixels. Okay, so that makes it pretty large. And then I'm going to set the margin. I want it to move up, so I'm going to do 80 pixels, 0, 40 pixels. And then let's do the countdown. So the countdown wraps around all of this right here, and I want these to display in a horizontal fashion. So if we just set display flex, it'll do that. And then I want this to be larger, so I'm actually going to use transform scale. 2. Okay, so that'll make that larger. Now that still doesn't look right, obviously, so we need to style each time element within the countdown. So I'm going to display flex here, although if I do that, it's going to try to do side by side, and we don't want that. We want it to be a column, so let's say flex direction column, which will put them back on top of each other, and then we can go ahead and align to the center and also justify to the center. And let's add a margin here to clear things up a little bit. So 15 pixels margin. And then for the H2, let's say time H2, which is the numbers, they're a little too far apart from the units. So let's set a margin. We'll do 0, 0, 5 pixels, which will bring them closer. And then I'm just going to add a media query just so when it's smaller like this, it can still fit in there. So what we'll do is just add simple media query. We'll do a max width of, let's say, 500 pixels. And in here, I'm going to make the H1 smaller. So I'll set the font size. I think it's originally 60. We'll set it to 45, which will make that a little smaller. And then let's take the time, and I'm going to just set the margin here to 5 pixels instead of 15, which brings it closer together. And then I'm also going to make it smaller, so let's take the H2 in the time and set the font size. I'm going to do 12 pixels and take away any margin. And then for the small, which is the units, we'll also make that smaller. So we'll take the small tags and we'll set the font size to 10 pixels. Okay, so that way it kind of fits on the screen, even on smaller screens. So now that we have our basic HTML, CSS, in the next video we'll go ahead and we'll start to add our JavaScript. All right, so I'll see you in the next one. All right, so we have our landing page down, we have it styled, so now we basically need to just make it come alive. So first thing we're going to do is grab the DOM elements we need. So we need the days, the hours, minutes, and seconds. So let's do get element by ID, and let's grab the days, and I'll just copy this down a few times. So for this one, we'll do hours, so I'm just going to hold shift and arrow, which will select this days, and then I can Command D or Control D to select the next one, and we'll go ahead and change that to hours. Okay, then we can go down and let's grab this one, and this is going to be minutes, and let's go down, and this one is going to be seconds. And we also need countdown, so we'll go ahead and grab that as well. Okay, and later on we'll need the loading and the year as well, but we're not going to do that just yet. So we need to, in JavaScript, we need to generate the actual year. We need the current year, and we also need the new year time. What is the time we're actually counting down till? But what I'm going to do first is just hard code it, and then I'll show you how we can change it so that it's dynamic. So if we say new year time, and we set this to new date, okay, so we're using the JavaScript date object here, or date constructor, and we can put in here January 01, 20, let's do 2021, which is next year. And then the time, so we'll just do 0, 0 for hours, minutes, and seconds. So we can hard code it like this. Now, if we keep it this way, if you're going to keep using this landing page, you'll have to come in and you'll have to change it every time. So I actually want to make it dynamic. So what we'll do is let's go right above it and let's get the current year. So const current year, and we can get that by saying new date, so that'll give us basically the date and time. We want to just get just the year, so it's 2020. That's what we want to get from here. So there's a method we can call called get full year, so we want to set it to that. And then instead of manually hard coding this in here, let's change, all we really need to change is the year. I mean, January 1st, obviously that's what we want. So instead of 2020 hard coded in here, let's change our quotes to backticks so that we can put in an expression in here. So we'll change this to backticks, and then right here we'll use our template literal syntax and put in the current year and then just add 1 to it. So in this case it's going to be 2021, but if we go next year where it's 2021, it'll be 2022. So we won't have to manually update this. So the next thing I'm going to do is create a function called update countdown. And for now, I'm just going to call it down here. And I mean, ultimately what we're going to want to do is call this every single second because we need it to count down every second, but I'm going to do that after we do the calculations because I just want to show you some things first. So in here, let's go ahead and get the current time, and we can do this by simply setting this to new date. Okay, just using the date constructor. And then we need to get the difference from this date, so the new year time, which is in this case January 1st, 2021, 0 seconds. We want to get the difference between that and the current time. So if I go ahead and console log diff, and let's go over here and open up our console, what we get here is the number of milliseconds from now until then, and today is actually January 2nd, 2020. So we still have 364 days until the next year. My plan was initially to do this in December and have this kind of be, have it almost be New Year's, but things ran a little later and it already passed. So we still have quite a while till the beginning of the next year. So that gives us the milliseconds. So what we need to do now is calculate the days, hours, minutes, and seconds. So let's say const d for days, and we're going to wrap this in the math.floor method, which will just round it down. And in here we're going to take the difference and let's divide by 1,000 to get the number of seconds, okay, instead of milliseconds. So if I save that, actually let's console log d, we get that, which should be the number of seconds until next year. So let's just double check that. We'll go ahead and copy that, and we can search for seconds to days. That's what we want here. And we can do this right in Google. So if I paste this in, you can see we get 364 days. So that gives us the seconds. We want the actual days. So from here, if we divide this again by 60, what's that going to give us? That's going to give us the hours. I'm sorry, not the hours, the minutes. So if we take a look at what that gives us, let's save, and we get this number here. So I'll copy this, and let's search now for minutes to days. And if I paste this in here, there we go, 364. So now, remember, we want the days. This is the number of minutes. If I divide again by 60, what does that give us? That gives us the number of hours, right? So if we take a look at this number, we get 8740. If we search now for hours to days, and we look at this number of hours, we get 364. Now, again, we're looking for days, not hours. So the last thing we can do here is just divide by 24 because there's 24 hours in a day. So let's save that, and we get down here 364. So that gives us the days. So for the, what do we want next? The hours, we want to just change this to H. And then we're actually going to take this out. So that'll give us hours, but we need to account for the number of hours that have passed already in this day. So we're going to use the modulus, which will give us the remainder, and then 24. So let's down here, console log H, and we get 4. Okay, so that'll be the number for hours. Now for minutes, let's change this to M. We're going to go ahead and just get rid of this 60. And then we want modulus 60 because we want it to account for the minutes that have already passed. And let's just console log M here, and we get 55. Because right now it's actually 7:05. or 7:04, but we're rounding. So that's the minutes, and then for the seconds, actually let me just copy this down. So for seconds, call this S, and we want to take we want to get the number of seconds here, which is this, because we're just dividing the diff, which is the milliseconds, by 1,000 to give us the seconds. And again, we want a modulus 60 because there's 60 seconds in a minute. So let's go ahead and console log S, and we get 34. And if I reload, it should be different. So it's obviously going to keep counting down. So this gives us what we need to input in these elements right here, in these time spots. Okay, and we actually want to run this update countdown. We want to run this every single second. So what I'm going to do, let's get rid of, actually we'll keep this here for now just to make sure that it runs every second. And we just need to call set interval. So set interval is just a function in JavaScript that'll take in a function, any function we want, in this case update countdown, and run it at every whatever milliseconds we put here, in this case 1,000, which is 1 second. So if I save, this should run now every second, and we're actually console logging S here, which is the number of seconds left. Okay, now we want to get this into here, right? We don't care about logging it. We want to get this into the DOM, into the UI here. So let's get rid of this, and still within here, let's take days and set the inner HTML to D. Simple as that. So if I save, there we go. We get 364. So for hours, let's say hours dot inner HTML. Now in this case, I don't want to just simply set it to H. If I do that, now we get 4. However, what we want to do is say if it's less than 10, we're going to put a 0 in front of it. All right, so let's actually set this to an expression. We'll say if H is less than 10, and we're going to use a ternary operator here, which is like a shorthand if statement, which is a question mark. So if that's true, then let's display 0 plus the hour, else, which is the colon, then just the hour. So if I save now, it should be 04. Okay, but when it gets to 10, it'll just be 10, 11, 12, and so on. All right, so we want to do the same thing with minutes and seconds. So I'm just going to copy this down twice, and then let's take the minutes. And remember, these right here, days, hours, and minutes, these are just coming from up here where we're selecting them from the DOM, which are these elements here. So this is going to be, let's see, M. So if M is less than 10, then we're going to show 0M, else just M. And then for seconds, we're going to do the same thing. So we'll change that, change this, and that. All right, so let's save. Whoops, we got to change this to seconds. Okay, so there's our countdown. So we have 364 days, 4 hours, 51 minutes, and 22 seconds, 21, 20. So now that we have that initial countdown, in the next video, you can see if I reload, when we enter the page for a second, it just says 00. That's where I want to add the little spinner. And then I also want to have like the year in the background, or the next year. What year are we actually counting down till? And we need to style that as well. So we'll get to that in the next video, and then we should be all set. Okay guys, in this video we're gonna go ahead and add the year, or the coming year, in the background here, and we also want to have a little spinner graphic so that when we load the page we don't see that 00. And there's other ways we could do this, but I like the spinner idea. So let's start with the date, or the year. So right here you can see we have the placeholder, and I can actually just hard code it here for now. We'll just say 2021. So if I save, it just looks like this right now. So we need to actually style this. So we need to go back into our CSS, and we'll just close that up. We want to style this, so I'm going to go, let's see, we'll go right under the H1 here, and there's a class of year, and we want it to be really big, so I'm going to set the font size to 200 pixels. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to do. Next, we want to move it behind the rest of the content, so we'll add a z-index of -1, which will push it behind everything. Okay, even the overlay, which is good. And then I want to make it even lighter, so I'll set the opacity here to 0.2, so that will really fade it into the background. And then let's position it. And I mean, you can do this however you want. If you want it smaller, if you want to put it somewhere else, you can do that. But I'm going to position it absolute from the bottom, 20 pixels, and from the left, 50%. Now, it's not going to be right in the middle by just saying left 50%, because what happens is that just the beginning is at the 50% point. So to fix that, we use transform and then translate X, because it's on the X axis, and we want to move it -50%. Okay, so we're just moving the actual element back 50% to the left, which is negative. Okay, and then let's just set, actually I think that's it. Yeah, so I think that's pretty good. I mean, it's going to look different depending on the size of your browser. You know, if it's up here, it'll go behind it or whatever. But I just want it kind of positioned fixed in the background, or absolute in the background. But if you want to put it somewhere else, absolutely you can do that. So in order for this to not be hard-coded, because, I mean, if it turns 2021, this is still going to say 2021, and we want it to then change to 2022. So let's actually get rid of the year, the hard-coded year, so it disappears. And then let's go back into our JavaScript, and all we have to do is bring in our DOM element, the year. So let's say document dot get element by ID, and it has an ID of year. And then I'm just going to go right under, where do we want to go? Let's go right above the function here and just simply set the year. We'll put a comment here. We'll say set background year. And we'll take the year, we'll set the inner text, and we'll set it to the current year, but we want to add one to it. So if we save, now we get 2021. If I were to change this, let's say current year plus 2, which would make it 2022. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not what I want to do. I want to change this current year. So if I add 1 to this, there we go. So now it's 2022. Okay, so it depends on whatever this is. So now that we've done that, let's take care of the spinner. So I'm going to go to the HTML, and I'm just going to uncomment this. And now this is just going to show all the time. So what we want to do is go into our JavaScript, and I'm going to go down to the bottom here. Actually, let me add a comment here. So this will update time, or update countdown time, which is pretty self-explanatory, but I like to have comments on my functions. And this will run every second. But right here, what I want to do is show spinner before countdown. And then right here, these that we're adding, let's say add values to DOM. So to show the spinner, I'm going to actually set a timeout here. So set timeout will take in a function, and then we can do whatever we want in this function, and it will happen whatever the amount of time we put here, it'll happen after that. So we want this to happen in 1 second, so 1,000 milliseconds. And what we want to do is take loading, which we didn't actually bring in, so we have to go up to the top here. Oops. We have to go up to the top and bring in loading. Just copy that down, and let's take this. So loading. Okay, so we're bringing that in, and then we're going to set loading and set, we're just going to remove it. Okay, so there's a method called remove that will just completely remove something from the DOM. So if I save this, what's going to happen is after a second, when the page loads, the loading thing goes away. But you can see that the zeros are still there. This thing is still here. So all we have to do now is in the CSS, you'll see that the countdown is set to flex. I'm actually going to comment that out, and I'm going to set it display none so that it doesn't show. And then in the JavaScript, right after that is removed, we'll take the countdown and we're going to set the style from here, set the display value back to flex after 1 second. Okay, so it just won't show for 1 second. And there we go. So now when we come to the page, for 1 second it's going to show the spinner, and then after that it's going to make the spinner go away, and it's going to show the countdown because we're setting the display value from none, which it is set initially, to flex, which is what we had it to before. Okay, so now we have this as a dynamic countdown, and you don't have to go in and manually change the date or anything like that. So, you know, I thought it was a cool little project. I know it's a real short one, but it teaches you a little bit about time and dates and time and stuff like that. All right, so that's it. I'll see you in the next one.